Almost 35 years to the day since Miracle on Ice, but a young U.S. Olympic hockey team stunned the Russians in Lake Placid. Chuck Battey was there as a student reporter for the Dartmouth College newspaper. Hey, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Man, that's been a long time ago. They had a big reunion last weekend at Herb Brooks Arena, named after the U.S. coach. Of course, all of the players were there, most of them anyway. Of course, Mike Eruzione. Have you dealt with some of the guys since 1980?
I have not. It's funny. It's 35 years ago, and it hasn't come back very often to my mind.
So you were just this college kid working for the student newspaper. How did you end up at the game of the century?
College kid is right. I was very naive. Really didn't know my way around sports writing as much as I should have. So I just took it upon myself. I just wrote a letter to the U.S. Olympic Committee. I was sports editor of the Daily Dartmouth. And I thought I had the temerity to reach out to them and say, hey, could you give me a ticket? I said any ticket. I didn't specify hockey game or anything, just get me there. And they were nice enough. A few weeks later, to my surprise, I got an envelope at the newsroom with two tickets, one to the men's slalom downhill, a slalom ski race, and then the other to a yet-to-be specified hockey game.
Well, it turned out to be the hockey game. The student you were supposed to go to the game with and meet him there scalped his ticket. Did he regret not being there?
I gotta think he does. I have not talked to him in 32 years. In fact, in part, kind of getting ready to talk to you, I reached out to him. His name's Hugh Robin, so I'll call him out on it. And it's really interesting. It was one of the great ironies. We got two tickets, the sports desk did, and he was my assistant editor. And he chose, we drove over there together, drove overnight, and unbeknownst to me, he chose to scalp his ticket. So when I arrived at the arena, sat in my seats, there was a stranger sitting next to me. That's the first I knew of it.
Well, at the time, there was political tension everywhere. The Russians had invaded Afghanistan. Jimmy Carter already planned to boycott the Summer Olympics that year. I don't even know if undercurrent is the right expression. Could you feel the tension, though, beyond sports, beyond hockey?
Definitely, because I was working, like I said, at the newspaper, and so it was definitely front page news all across the country and probably the world. And it was funny. I wanted to look at it as a sports event, and that's how I reported on it. But it was clearly much more than that.
So right after the game, you did what a good reporter does. You went to work filing your story, which meant driving back to Dartmouth from Lake Placid, which was, what, 5-6 hours?
Now, a little bit less than that, but it was a white-knuckle ride because it was snowing that night. And I could tell you that's a whole other story, but I'm kind of amazed. That was maybe the next miracle, was that I got back alive.
Did you have the story sort of percolating in your head as you drove back?
Yeah, and the way I wrote it was just stream of consciousness. It was actually put in print 2 days after the event, so it was old news. So the column I wrote was a column. And so it was kind of my own impressions of what it felt like to be there. And it was very difficult to put into words just because the emotions were so high for everybody there.
And that's the original copy that has survived.
Survived
volcanoes, floods.
Yeah, it's a little bit tattered. And it's the only copy I have. It's so funny. I didn't really save many mementos. It just sticks in my mind.
It's a really good commentary, especially when you consider a college student wrote it. If you wouldn't mind, read the beginning of that. I think it's really good.
Well, thank you. Thanks. Last Friday in Lake Placid, I feel I caught a brief glimpse of sports the way it was meant to be played. I saw a young group of athletes besides themselves with joy, having won a hockey game 4-3. I saw U.S. Olympic officials and fans ecstatic over a victory in which they played no tangible role, ignoring the pleas of referees to rush across the ice in muddy shoes and share the players' post-game jubilation. At last, I have seen the ability of sports to rally a team, an arena of fans, a nation, behind the common goal of being the best in the world in a simple game. And I think it is good.
That's terrific.
And I should say that last line, I don't think it's good. That's what I wrote into the commentary.
Yeah.
Because the whole experience, it was, again, I was telling you just when we were chatting, I feel like I was a little bit naive because I really wanted it to be about the sports. But as you commented earlier, it was much bigger than that. And so to think that it was a simple game is, I think, a gross understatement.
Did you ever write anything after that came with the same emotion that I feel when you read it?
Oh, yeah. And in fact, I wrote a piece that I think I shared with you, or a friend of ours shared with you. And that was 35 years later. And it was really interesting for me to write that. I wrote it a couple of weeks ago, just late at night, kind of inspired to do so. And yeah, it was an amazing experience, just reliving that emotion.
But you chose not to make sports reporting a career. Why not?
Yeah, I don't know. I sold out. I went into business instead. It's funny, when I graduated from Dartmouth, I was kind of weighing two paths. One was journalism, which back then meant print, and the other was going into business. And I chose the latter, and don't regret it. But as you can sense, I'm very proud of, and still like to write recreationally.
Well, for all of us old enough to have been part of it, I was watching in my living room. I had just started my first job in the media. I was a $5 an hour news assistant at KMBZ Radio. We all heard Al Michaels say, "Do you believe in miracles?" Yes, live.
Yeah.
And you heard that for the first time when?
Well, I heard it for the first time, I guess. I don't remember if I watched the rebroadcast that night. I doubt I did, because things were so crazy and ecstatic in the streets of Lake Placid. You know, the funny thing, I might not have seen that until I saw a rebroadcast on the movie Miracle, which was 10 years ago. Yeah, it's funny. You move on with your life. It's you just don't realize what you've experienced until many years later.
And of course, I was here watching it on TV, but the world stopped. Everybody was in front of a television set. And of course, that was the semifinal. The U.S. still had to beat Finland for the gold medal,
Right.
which they did. Hey, appreciate you coming in. Great
Hey,
stuff.
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Chuck Battey, our guest on Time Warner Cable Sports Channel.